WiSP Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Thanks for tuning to our first live streaming show here on WiSP Sports. I'm Chris Stafford, and today we're going to kick off with the WiSP Sports Desk, the weekly show where actually two of us are co-hosts here, and I'm going to be joined right now, hopefully, by Nancy Gillen. Actually, we should say it's our fourth episode in the WiSP Sports Desk, but it's the first one that we're doing live. So you were in Russia last week when we did the show.
Yeah, I was at the Men's World Boxing World Championships in Yekaterinburg. So I've come back from that, and then I've got the women's boxing next week, that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, so back and forth to Russia. All right, in the meantime, trying to keep on top of all the sport that's happening around the world as usual for Inside the Games. Check them out at insidethegames.biz, and of course, follow Nancy as well through the blog that you do there, Nancy. But I think right at the top of the show, people should know how to follow you anyway. Where do they find you on social media?
Well, my Twitter handle is @Nancy_Gillen, so they can follow me on that.
Super. All right. We'll remind you all at the end of the show here. But meanwhile, we've got a lot to get through today. As always, there's a lot more happening in women's sports almost every week, because there's world championships all the time, aren't there, Nancy? Even if there's not an Olympic Games or there's world championships everywhere.
Yeah, there's always, I think we were talking about earlier, there's always sports events, and there's always new sport events that are kind of popping up all the time. So there's always something happening.
I think it's timely here for us to have a live weekly show. And if you do join us after the show's gone live, you'll know that we will be posting these as a normal episode after with the live show, in case you missed us live streaming here at Podbean. And thanks to Podbean for introducing this feature so that we can do live podcasts now and take the show to a new level. So let's get underway with some of the stories. I want to start with soccer, Nancy, because it's easy for me on the US side of the pond here to gloat about the success of the US women's soccer team, but they went to the awards in Milan this week and really did sweep the board again. And congratulations to Megan Rapinoe. Of course, she's the US co-captain of their team, and not only did she win the best FIFA Women's Player of the Year, but also there was half the team, the new mock team, the first FIFA Pro Women's World 11 was comprised of US players. That was Rapinoe and Alex Morgan, of course, and the two midfielders, Juliet's and Rose Lavelle, and that crack defender, Kelly O'Hara. They were all honored as part of that sort of pseudo team. What did you think to that idea?
I think it was quite a good idea because it was it kind of recognised people, and kind of like across the whole team, because obviously there can only be one person that wins the individual award. So I think it'd be quite nice to be featured in the team of the year. I think it was completely fair enough that most of them were American, because obviously you've got the World Cup winning team there, and they won they performed so well. It wasn't kind of just they were so good at the World Cup that all the players that were named fully deserved to be in that team.
They certainly did. Really fantastic players, and we should not go any further without mentioning Jill Ellis. Of course, it's easy to focus on the players, but Jill Ellis has won her second consecutive World Cup title, and she was named as the best FIFA women's coach for 2019. Not surprising to obviously people who followed the sport, but a wonderful, if you like, bookend to her career, because she's going to be retiring from the national squad after their victory tour, which goes through November. And what an accolade. I mean, she's just done everything, Jill, and I think she'll be sorely missed. It will be a tough act to follow, won't it?
Yeah, it will. And I think I saw that she said that even though she was retiring, she's going to still be involved in football in some way, because she's it'd be hard to completely leave it behind. So hopefully we'll still see her in some capacity. I'm hoping of it because she's English, so I'm hoping she might come over here and either be manager over here, or maybe even our national team. That would be really nice. So hopefully it won't be the end of her in women's football.
No, I don't think she'll walk away completely. But of course, she does have a wife and family in Florida. So I guess she has different priorities now. But anyway, congratulations to all of them, because it has been a fantastic year for women's soccer. Really, really exciting. But, the story that we covered last week, I think, and the week before even, which we have an update on, is the situation in Iran, where women were barred from stadiums. Now, you've got an update from that, because you've written a few times on Inside the Games about this, haven't you?
Yeah, it's something that's kind of constantly developing and has kind of got quite a lot of attention recently. And so, the FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, he's been over to Iran, where women can't they're not allowed into football stadiums to watch matches. And there was quite a tragic turn earlier this month when there was a female football fan that died. She set herself on fire after finding out that she could go to prison for trying to get into a football match. So that's really put it into the spotlight, and a lot of pressure has been put on FIFA to try and end this ban, because they have quite a lot of power. We've talked about in a previous podcast. They could suspend the Iranian Football Federation, and if the men's team couldn't play in World Cup qualifiers, that could actually have quite a big impact on the relaxation of this ban. But Infantino has said that FIFA have been over in Iran and they've been talking to the authorities there, and he says that they've been assured that the next international game, women will be allowed to enter football stadiums. So that isn't it's a positive update, but it's not that new. I think there had been reports that Iran were going to let women into their match with Cambodia, which is taking place in October, and this is kind of now official confirmation from FIFA that it's definitely going to happen. So that's good, but then I suppose they need to be making sure that it happens, in all matches, in international matches, but also, their domestic league. And then also, as we talked about before, they need to be making sure that even if women are in the stadium, they're not being harassed or kind of shouted at or arrested or anything like that. So it's a good step forward. It's definitely a positive update, but we're still going to have to wait and see whether that actually, ends up with the ban relaxing and more women being allowed to watch football.
Yeah, and I'm sure all eyes will be on them, actually, if they maintain that policy, as you say, right across the board in domestic games as well. So that game is October the 10th in Tehran's Azadi Stadium, where Cambodia are playing Iran. So we'll see if that happens there, and there's no repercussions for the women, and we'll keep you posted here, of course, on the WiSP Sports Desk. Now, in 2 days' time, on the 27th of September, the World Athletics Championships kick off in Doha. And that's going to be, I think, a big event this year, and a lot of spotlight on other issues as well off the track, which I want to start with, Nancy, because I didn't realize there were 3 athletes, 3 Olympians, Margaret Naraya Wambu, Francine Nayozaba, and Caster Semenya, who are actually going to miss this World Championships because of the new rule that the IAAF has imposed, which means athletes with differences of sexual development, what they call DSD, are unable to compete now in the 400, 800, and 1500 meters. Now, I picked up this story off the Olympic Channel because they've actually interviewed some of these athletes on their podcast. So we'll put a link in the show notes with this episode so you can go and take a listen to that podcast as well. Were you aware that there were now 3 athletes that were going to miss out, as well as the ones that we mentioned before, like Brianna Williams, the Jamaican, and the other South African sprinter that are going to miss out because of bans? It's becoming, a little story in itself, isn't it? All these off the field, so to speak, incidents. What do you know about that?
I wasn't that aware, because obviously Semenya's her case is very famous, and she kind of, people know that she wasn't going to be at the World Championships. But the other 2, I wasn't aware until, like you said, the Olympic Channel ran something on it, and it kind of shows that it's, a lot of people think it's just affecting Semenya, but it's actually, there's quite a few athletes that are unable to compete, which, it kind of shows how important I think that the IAAF get this sorted, really, because in my opinion, I don't think it's that fair that they're not allowed to compete at all.
Well, the Kenyan 800-meter bronze medalist, Margaret Narayakwambu, she said she'd become a victim and doesn't know how to rebuild her life because of these new rules. And she's revealed that all to the Olympic Channel, how it's derailed her career in a sense, and that she doesn't even want to train or do anything. I mean, she's totally motivated. So it's very disappointing, and hopefully, there will be a complete review of all of this, because I think it seems to be, a flowing river right now, the issues around gender equality. So we'll keep you posted here. Now, talk about gender equality, and we're not going to get too excited about this because it doesn't represent a huge change in direction, but it's a change in the right direction. That just this week, in fact, today, the IAAF at their annual meeting, they've actually announced that Colombia's Jimena Restrepo will become the first female vice president of the IAAF. Now, she's a Colombian Olympic medalist, and she won the 400 meters in Barcelona actually in 1992. She's turning the tide here as a vice president, but it still means that of the Congress there, Nancy, where there are 26 members, there's only 8 of them that are women.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things where, well, first thing is she's the first female vice president. I think it's in 117 years, which is kind of it's great when you read the headline, but when you realise 117 years, that's quite horrendous. And then, like you said, it's almost kind of it's not tokenistic, because she will be extremely effective as vice president, and hopefully she can bring in change. But like you said, when you look at the fact that not even half of the council are women, there's almost like an underlying problem, which hopefully they're not just going to gloss over because they now have a female vice president. Hopefully it will start bringing about more change, and maybe they can get those numbers up.
Yeah, well, congratulations to her. It is a move in the right direction, but still a long way to go. And also, this leads nicely to our next story this week, Nancy. Nordic combined, it's not an Olympic sport yet for women, and they won't have a World Championships of their own until 2021. Now, Tara Garati-Moats is a WiSP ambassador, so full disclosure here, but she's been keeping us apprised of the inequality in the sport, because the USA doesn't currently have a Nordic combined A team, meaning that there's no way for the women Nordic combiners to qualify for full funding. And she's hoping that will change once they get onto the World Championship level there. Now, she's won 13 international Nordic combined events in a row in the Continental Cup, and she's ranked number 1 in the world. So obviously she's clearly focused on getting to those World Championships, but it does again speak to the inequality, because she's not able to have access to the training facilities that the men have. She has to pay for training camps and pay for her own equipment, or raise money in some way and sponsorship. And she's doing that. She's trying to raise money to keep her on target for those World Championships. But, there's still a long way to go in some sports. Yeah,
and I think that just shows, there's obviously in sports like kind of football and ones like that, there's, the debate has almost risen a level to kind of stuff like, like TV coverage and attendance. But then when you've got certain sports like Nordic combined, where it's just completely, you don't even get the bare minimum, like being able to train, which is just, I think it kind of shows the importance of almost just making sure that a lot of sports don't get left behind. So it's really good that she's, relaying her experience in some way. So hopefully, they can sort it out and she can get to the level where she can train, with her male counterparts.
Yeah, because right now she is the only senior athlete. The other 2 female athletes are both in high school. So that is, quote unquote, the extent of the US team. So, they're really having to paddle their own canoe here. And it's an uphill battle. And no pun intended here, because not uphill, but downhill, because obviously the ski jumping is part of that Nordic combined. So good luck to them. We'll keep you posted here. And obviously Tara's focus now is being able to get to the hills, to a hill where she can continue to jump and train, because I think that's another problem, that she hasn't had access to the hills and hasn't been able to jump as much as she could normally would in training there and get ready for the Continental Cup that starts next month.
Hi, I'm Nicole Drought. I'm an Irish racing driver and a proud WiSP ambassador. I support WiSP because they help to increase visibility in women's sport. This is quite important because it will help to encourage girls into sport if they have role models to look up to. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Nicole Drought Racing. Thanks for listening and supporting WiSP.
Now, going back to executives in sports administration, you've got a story out of the Ghana Olympic Committee.
Yeah, the Ghana Olympic Committee President, Ben Nunhu Mensah, he's just called for an increased representation of women in sports administration across Ghana, but also across the whole of Africa, which is, they do seem to be doing some good stuff there as well. They've just announced Elizabeth King, who used to play hockey, and she's president of the Ghanaian Hockey Association, I think. So she's now head of a women's commission within the Ghana Olympic Committee. And I think they've also put quite a bit of funding into supporting women's sport in Ghana, and they're also organising a conference addressing issues surrounding female participation in Ghanaian sport. So it's that's quite some positive news actually there, because he's called for increased representation, but then they're actually doing some really concrete things there. So hopefully that will be quite effective, and it's good to see countries and Olympic committees actually caring about stuff like that.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, good for them. And a story that we covered last week, because it really, in terms of the bobsled world, this is a big story, because Kaillie Humphries, a two-time Olympic champion, she was taking the Canadian bobsleigh governing body to task, and I think actually filing a lawsuit against them. And we reported that last week on the news. But you've got an update about that and what she's doing now.
Yeah, so she wasn't competing, but she was there. She was involved in some capacity at the USA Bobsled Push Championships. So she was testing the timing systems so she went round the track before the competitors did. And she was allowed to do that because it wasn't an official international bobsleigh and skeleton federation event. So it was kind of an unofficial thing. But it's quite interesting, obviously, that she's doing stuff with the American bobsleigh kind of setup. So she has said that she wants to, defer to the United States. So she's kind of a defector. She's almost trying to kind of push her way in a little bit. So yeah, it's quite an interesting update, because we'll just have to see what happens. She's still with Canada officially, but it's interesting that she's being involved in the American side of things unofficially.
Yeah, doing all she can at least to get on US turf and play her game. All right, well, we've got news of a few World Championships, as we said at the top of the show, as they're happening everywhere. And the World Weightlifting Championships, which you're reporting on inside the games there, that started, I think we're now into the 8th day. There's 26 nations taking part in that, and they're in Pattaya, aren't they?
Yeah, that's taking place in Thailand. There's been some quite interesting stories coming out of that as well. We were talking about Iran earlier, and it was actually the Iranian first time that an Iranian women's team has competed at a weightlifting World Championships. And it was actually, women weren't allowed to compete in weightlifting until 2017. So it was only 2 years ago that they were officially allowed to compete. And Pupak Basami, I think that's her name, she became the first Iranian woman to compete at the World Championships last Thursday. So that's the president of the USA Weightlifting. She said that she's been really impressed with how the Iranian lifters have done, because obviously, like I said, they've only been competing for 2 years. So apparently they've been quite impressive. So that's quite a good news story. And then I think there's also a female weightlifter from Botswana, and she became her country's first ever athlete at all to compete at the weightlifting championships. So that is just the first time that Botswana had ever sent a team, and so she was the first one to compete. So yeah, there's some female athletes, female weightlifters making history over in Thailand.
And lifting some serious weights out there too, I see. I mean, it really is impressive.
It
All
is,
right.
yeah.
Well, another one of our WiSP ambassadors is in Spain at the moment for the World Canoe, Slalom and Wildwater Championships, which actually started today, the Wednesday to September 25th. They go through till the 29th. Now, Hayley Daniels is a Canadian canoeist, and she'll be, as I say, she's our WiSP ambassador, and she'll be competing there. But Jess Fox, of course, is going to be a favourite again, and the Australian, you know it. I mean, she's just absolutely amazing, Jess. We've had her on a show in the past and just watched her career. She just goes from one win to the other. She's really pretty unbeatable at the moment. But if you have time and you're interested in canoeing, hop over to canoeicf.com, because they actually have a live stream on and a double stream on their front page. They're really tuned into this live streaming. And so you can watch a lot of the competition there right on the front page, which I did earlier this morning, which is great fun to watch. Water goes a bit too fast for me, but very exciting to watch. And speaking of world championships, world games, the World Beach Games takes place next month, and they're going to Doha, Qatar, where it all seems to be happening this season. What do you know about that? All I know is there's 14 sports, and there's some pretty unusual sports in there too. So how did that come about?
So yeah, it was organised by the Association of National Olympic Committees, so ANOC. It was originally supposed to take place in San Diego and then was relocated to Doha. And I think it's just kind of almost maybe another way of getting people interested in sports. So we had the World Urban Games earlier this month in Budapest, which was kind of stuff like parkour and skateboarding and climbing and BMX. And then this is kind of another, everything's taking place on the beach. So like you said, there's some quite interesting stuff. So there's a beach karate, beach wrestling, and then you've got your kind of more classic ones like beach volleyball, and I think there's also skateboarding there and stuff. So it'd be quite interesting to have a look at and see how it goes. It is something quite different. I think that's kind of where in the Olympics, they're adding sports like climbing and skateboarding and breakdancing. So I think it's kind of another attempt almost to widen, get more people interested in sport, because some people might quite like beach karate. I don't know.
Well, each to their own, and I don't think there's a definitive list now of sports that women can do, because there just seems to be new ones coming on stream all the time. There are so many sports out there. There's and variations of sports as well. But it'd be interesting to see if that format works, because we talked about the Urban Games the other day, didn't we, on the show? Because that too is a new inception. That's brand new, an innovative idea of combining sport and entertainment as well. And interesting. While we're talking about World Games and collecting these sports together as a games, Nancy, the World Equestrian Games, which started in 1990 in Stockholm and happens every 4 years around the Olympic cycle, that built up to having 7 and now 8 disciplines as part of that. But it has always struggled financially to get the sponsorship and to get the audience and the cross interest of audiences for each of those disciplines to get them all in one place. I mean, it's great in terms of media coverage. The lesser nations, of course, in those minority sports benefit from that, from increased media coverage. It's an opportunity for sponsors, and it does give them exposure, of course, in a new and different way. But they've struggled ever since they started, really, and the last one, when the World Equestrian Games took place here in Tryon, North Carolina, and there was actually now calls from the International Federation, the International Equestrian Federation, that is the governing body, to actually re-examine the validity and the sustainability of a games format. So we will see. I know when some will say that that's a pretty elitist sport, having equestrian disciplines together. And would they do better if they were back on their own like they used to be prior to 1990? And some since then, of course, that have joined, like reining and paradressage, and endurance is another one, to join the Olympic disciplines of dressage, eventing, and show jumping. So That's another interesting, evolution of sport, and whether they benefit from all coming together. So the World Games is one, the World Beach Games. We'll watch that too and see if that flies in the future. But right now they've got 14 sports, and as I mentioned, they're taking place in Doha, Qatar, from October the 12th through the 16th. And again, we'll have a link in the show notes with this episode at wisports.com, where you can catch all the links to the stories that Nancy and I have discussed here on the show. And before we go, I want to mention some of the other shows that WiSP Sports is doing now. This week, you'll be able to watch 5 shows, Bit by Bit, Sports Psychology, The Horse Show. The WiSP Sports Desk, of course, goes out every Wednesday now. The Wheat Coach podcast is out this Thursday on Friday, and this tomorrow, Fair Play, the show that we do in partnership with Radio New Zealand and tells you all about what's happening with women in sport in New Zealand. Zoe George hosts that, and that will be live tomorrow here at WiSP Sports. All of these shows are on wisports.com, but if you're listening on Podbean, of course, and on the Podbean app, you can find them right there by subscribing to WiSP Sports and also by following us on Podbean. Now, next week, we're going to be introducing some new shows to the roster, which I'm really excited about. The Tucker Center, which is the Tucker Center Research for Girls and Women in Sport, is a marvelous organization based in Minnesota. They're launching their first podcast with us next week in partnership with us, a co-production there. So we're looking forward to that. And so we've got Roller Derby coming back now for season 2, The Lovely Beatrice. That show is hosted by Kaillie Humphries, and she'll be live next Friday. So look out for that. And we've got a new sports psychology show, which is a much deeper, in-depth conversation that I have with Dr. Jenny Susser. That takes place every other Wednesday on a show called The Mind Matters. I'll be hosting The Horse Show next week, and The Bolder Woman, which tells the story of women who are still competitive over 50. And there's some great stories there. That happens every other week too. So there's lots to look for. We have over 46 shows. 18 of those are currently in production, and now our global audience reaches 3.2 million. So there's something for everybody in women's sports here. We are the largest and only sports network for podcast network for women in sports. So this has been our first live show here on Podbean. Thanks to Podbean for bringing us this opportunity to add live streaming to our roster. And to my co-host, Nancy Gillen, who next week, where will you be?
I haven't quite learned how to say it yet, but I think it's Ulan-Ude in Siberia, Russia, for the Women's World Boxing Championships.
The intrepid reporter.
Yeah, there should be a lot of good stories coming out of that, though, so that would be fun.
Yeah, all right, absolutely. Well, we'll catch up with you there in the far reaches of Russia again. Stay warm, and we look forward to catching up with you then. In the meantime, of course, you can follow Nancy on InsideTheGame.biz, where her blog is, and also there on social media. Tell them again, it's Nancy_Gillen, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Perfect. And we, of course, are at WiSP Sports on all the social media channels. So do follow and share, and join us again next week, 10 a.m. Eastern, on every Wednesday, where I'll be here with Nancy for the latest in the women's sports news from around the world.